So we're doing this short video with my friend Michelle, and she had asked me to put together some more information about sports karate and its difference between traditional karate and sport karate, and maybe a little bit about its development. So here we go. Before we could get too deep into that, we got to go back and understand a couple basic things. Funakoshi was born at a time when there was really no sports karate that existed. There was no competitions. There were matches, and those matches were typically fought by people with weapons. More commonly the sword. When Funakoshi was born, just around that time, Japan had physically taken over possession of Okinawa. They had taken the king and queen of Okinawa and invited them to go on a visit to the Tokyo area. And in typical Japanese fashion, they were put in their own prestigious castle. They had their own servants, and they were invited to stay for an extended period. And that's a general way of saying you're not allowed to go home. And they lived the rest of their days in the Tokyo area, while the Japanese government then took over what was Okinawa. So soon after that, Funakoshi is born, and many changes were going on in Japan at that time. They were changing from a feudal society to more of a militaristic governed society. And with that, there was expansion of new teaching ideas, the institution of the school system, a lot of political changes going on in Japan at that time. So this is the environment that Funakoshi grew up in, and by the time he was of age, the then Prince Hirohito, who would later to become the Emperor of Japan, did a tour of Okinawa in the, I believe, around something pre 1920, probably. I'm guessing probably somewhere around 1912, 1915. I could look up the exact date if you need it. And he was given a demo of what karate was about. Then the Emperor, Prince Hirohito, was so impressed at that point. He went on with his worldwide voyage, but later on, when he ascended the throne, there was an invitation given to Funakoshi to come and do a demonstration in the Tokyo area for the then Ministry of Physical Education. And he was, just like the king and queen of Okinawa, sort of invited to stay permanently. He wasn't forced to stay, but he thought it would be the best thing for the development of karate. So starting in the late 1920s, he established himself in the Tokyo area. And that's when his formal teaching of karate started in Japan. So he made a lot of changes to karate and took a lot of the Chinese elements of it out and put them, replaced them with things which sounded more Japanese and took on more Japanese culture and aspects. So he made big changes to what karate was when he was younger. When he was younger, karate was basically referred to as China Hand. And so he changed the characters for China Hand to Empty Hand, and that became the basis of the word karate. So during his time, and with the implementation of his dojo, there was not a lot of different types of karate being taught. It was something very new at that time, and so there was not a lot of formal competitions of any kind. But in order to spur the growth of karate, he was urged by Kano to develop various clubs at the universities to turn it into a more highly educated art. So the universities around the Tokyo area all started to establish their own karate clubs. And Funakoshi, over the course of a week, would practice for one day or have one class at one university, and would in the evening, and then he would go to another university like that. So these universities develop their own teams. And of course, when you have teams of young people getting together, then competition will eventually arise. So there was some very limited competition between university teams, and it was a very brutal thing. It was very common for people to get black eyes or a broken jaw or smashed nose or a lip split down, halfway down their face that needed a bunch of stitches to close it up. Um, these kind of things were brutal and common, and they were sort of macho tests of the toughness of the team in general. So that went on for some time, and I think Funakoshi did not like a lot of that, and he made a great effort to structure karate such that it could be learned in a way that didn't require that level of brutality. So time goes on, and he finally, of course, the war comes, and he lost many students, and many of the advanced people that were there passed away, or were gone, or were sent away to war and passed away. And actually, Funakoshi went back to Okinawa for a short period of time, and then he was traveling back to the Tokyo area after the war, and he was greeted by many people, and they all encouraged him to go back to teaching. So he, at a very advanced age, I think he was in his late 70s at that point, even started to revitalize karate again. But by this time, there was enough young people involved that they were really clamoring for some excitement. And karate was viewed as a way to interject the spirit back into the Japanese people, because they were, after the war, of course, severely crushed at their loss because of the war. And so it was viewed as a way to put back the inner spirit of what the Japanese people could be again. So a little bit of this gets infused into the earliest little competitions they had. And these probably occurred in the late 40s at the university level. And of course they became very physical again. And Nakayama had urged Funakoshi to allow and develop some kind of rules for actual competition. And so between Nakayama, Nishiyama, Obata, and several other people, they formulated a way to have a karate competition without having a lot of damage. And this started to occur probably in the early to mid 50s. And so some of the first national competitions of karate occurred with the JKA, and that later bled back actually to Okinawa, and Okinawa started to have their own competitions with different styles there. But in the earliest days, the competitions that were held by the JKA were by some of its most seasoned people. And the structure that it turned out to be was that the JKA had the idea, and I shouldn't say the JKA, more Nakayama's idea was to seed different parts of the world with high quality instructors. And he would get these high quality instructors by having them compete against each other. So this was the first fruition of the JKA tournaments that happened in the early to mid 50s. And the top instructors that were then, the people who won the competitions were actually invited to go to instructor training, and from there they would secure a post or a place where they were going to go to a different part of the world and teach karate, and it would be funded by the JKA and the membership dues and the association dues, and that would then allow that person to stay in that particular country, whether it was England, South Africa, Taiwan, or wherever they were going to decide to send someone. It would give them some kind of a base pay, and they're actually being paid to teach karate. So those early competitions were by seasoned practitioners. Those people had between 8 to 15 years of karate experience already. And so the karate that they were using at the exhibits, at the competition, was very precise, very clean, very controlled, and actually very beautiful. Is that the karate from those days, to look at it in old films, uh, shows a very beautiful execution of very clean techniques. And this is kind of the hallmark of that era. There was not a very sophisticated timing or distance control. It was just who had the cleanest technique, who could dominate a match. So there was a certain level of brutality. There was no protective gear really at all. And occasionally these people had been training for really life or death kind of karate training by hitting the makiwara board many times during the course of their training. So they learned to make a technique that was very penetrating and very strong. They learned how to tighten their whole body, how to relax their body to then become tight. These things all proved to be developing what we now call a very finishing blow or a decisive blow. So this is the way competition was at that time. But other styles, seeing this, tried to copy this. And they did it very poorly because they didn't have the level of training or the understanding that the JKA had at that time. And so their karate competitions were more like just chicken fighting, people just swinging away and carrying on with each other. So this is something that the karate outside of the JKA takes on a look of. And somehow it still interjects a little bit of excitement. And this is what spurs on the earliest karate competitions that were held in the United States. This is the excitement of this match. So we have some of the early competitions probably occurring 60, 61, 62, 63, like that. And they're sort of flashy and flary and not very decisive techniques, but a lot of quick techniques, a lot of people trying to outspeed other people. But the karate doesn't have that decisive finishing blow to it. So the best way I could describe this is traditional karate. If this is the target, the person looking to strike the target doesn't just come to the target. He goes through the target, and this is where the technique finishes. With with sports karate of that time in the early 60s and maybe a little later, maybe almost reaching into the 70s, it becomes speed, distance, and timing. And what we have then occurring is people using techniques that just come to just barely touch the opponent, maybe a little bit of contact, but pull away very fast. Pulling away very fast accomplishes two things. It gets you out of harm's way. If the technique doesn't have any contact and any penetration or no shocking effect, then this person is still very viable to then counterattack you. So by getting close, scoring a point and running away, then that's the nature of the technique. And so for some period of time, that kind of technique has developed. And that has started to dominate European karate and even karate that we have, the competition karate we see today. It has a look and a feel of just quickly get there, score, and run away. And so it doesn't have the same decisiveness, the same finishing blow that old traditional karate had. So the goal of many traditional karate people is to reintroduce into today's students this idea of finishing blow, but mixed with some timing, mixed with some understanding of distance. And then this can preserve a very high level of karate. So I know that we have talked about this kind of thing in the past, but hopefully this will jog your memory a little bit and give you some better basis of what this can be. The only way karate can survive for the future is if we continue to just teach sport karate, then the technique or the understanding of making a decisive action will sort of fade into the background and go away. So it's very important that we work hard to let younger people and all practitioners of karate understand that karate has a purpose, not just to look funny or to dance around or do kata and just feed your own ego through competition. More important is that you hone your skills so that when you're 40, 60, 70, you still have some decisiveness. And this kind of training is something completely different. So I hope that clarifies what karate should be today and what will preserve it for the future. So, okay, Michelle, that's what I can tell you now. Bye-bye.